Before history was written, before pyramids pierced the sky, the world was already ancient, littered with monoliths, buried cities, and stories of gods, giants, and beasts. But what if the myths were memories? What if the flood didn't just wash away people, but proof? These are the 49 most unsolved pre-flood mysteries, too massive to explain, too real to ignore. From sunken empires to star maps in stone, the clues are everywhere. You just have to look closer. This isn't history. It's what history tried to forget. Before we dive headfirst into the forgotten abyss, hit that subscribe button to join the search for what came before history. And while you're here, drop a comment. Where on earth are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Midnight in Manila? Sunrise in Sao Paulo? We're mapping the watchers of the unknown. The Sardinia giants' graves, Tombe dei Giganti. They're called the Tombe dei Giganti, tombs of the giants. You'll find them scattered across the wild, sun-bleached landscapes of Sardinia like the bones of some extinct civilization, ancient and defiant. Massive slabs of stone, curved like a yawning mouth, arranged in rows that make no architectural sense to modern logic. There are over 800 of them. Some are 30 feet long. Others are shaped like bullhorns, but all of them whisper the same question: who the hell were these for? Officially, they're tombs, but nothing about them is official. The scale is wrong. The burial customs don't match neighboring cultures. And the local legends? They talk of beings 10 feet tall. Giants. Creatures who could walk over mountains and rip up trees like weeds. Sardinians never really stopped believing in them. Even today, the air around these structures feels thick, like it's hiding something older than memory. Archaeologists have found bones in these sites, sure, but often they're scattered, fragmentary, burned, not exactly a tidy necropolis. And some of the bones, larger than they should be. Some skulls are elongated, misshapen. That's when things get uncomfortable. Suddenly, we're straying into the land of pseudoscience, of suppressed discoveries and whispered conspiracies about ancient beings wiped from the textbooks. And yet, these monuments are real. You can walk up to them, touch them, try to lift one of the capstones. Go on, try. They weigh tons. No pulleys, no cranes. Just raw, prehistoric ambition. But who built them? When? And why this style, this impossible design, repeated with almost obsessive precision across the entire island? No one agrees, and maybe that's the point. Because the moment you think you've solved one mystery, Sardinia slaps another one in your face. Like a forest of stone, each tomb points deeper into a foggy past. A prehistory that doesn't want to be understood. And speaking of forests of stone, there's a place in France, not far from the Atlantic coast, where over 3,000 megaliths stand in eerily perfect lines. No graves, no bones, just rocks. Lots and lots of rocks. The Carnac stones, alignments of Carnac. Brittany, France, seaside towns and Celtic myths, and then Carnac, an unassuming village that just happens to be ground zero for one of the strangest, most inexplicable megalithic mysteries on Earth. We're talking about the alignments of Carnac. Over 3,000 standing stones stretched across the landscape like some forgotten code carved into the earth itself. The lines go on for miles. In some places, the stones are small, barely knee-high. In others, they tower overhead like petrified titans, and they're aligned, dead straight, row after row after row. Who does that? And more importantly, why? There's no obvious function. No tombs beneath them, no inscriptions, no offerings, just stone, soil, and silence. Some say it was a massive astronomical observatory. Others think it was a ritual landscape, a place where the living communed with the dead, or the gods, or both. And then there are those who say this was a kind of prehistoric computer, a machine made of stone that encoded knowledge long lost. Yeah, it sounds wild, but so is the fact that these stones date back to around 3,300 BCE. That's older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than most civilizations we even acknowledge. Legends? Oh, plenty. Local folklore says they were Roman soldiers turned to stone by a wizard, or druids, or aliens. Take your pick. What gets stranger is that no one knows how they got here. The stones aren't native. They were moved, hauled across uneven terrain in an age when the wheel was barely a rumor. Some of the largest weigh several tons. And they weren't just dumped. They were placed, deliberately, meticulously. There's a rhythm to Carnac, a geometry that speaks of intelligence, precision, purpose. But what that purpose was, still a shrug in a trench coat. And then there's the unsettling feeling visitors often report like being watched, judged, scanned. The rows become aisles, the stones become sentinels, the silence becomes deafening. Whatever happened here wasn't random. It was ritual, sacred, maybe forbidden. Still think we've got history figured out? Because just when you're adjusting to the idea of an entire stone computer spanning the French countryside, the next mystery isn't even about rocks or graves. It's about an entire civilization that might have been wiped off the planet and out of memory by something cataclysmic, or someone. The mystery of Atlantis. Further speculations. Atlantis. Say the word and you're already in myth territory. Crystal towers, flying machines, oceans swallowing continents whole. Plato gave us the first account around 360 BCE, claiming it was real, a once great empire destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. Historians say it's an allegory, philosophers say it's a metaphor, conspiracy theorists say it's a cover-up, and then there's the archaeological evidence fragmentary, tantalizing, and utterly defiant of explanation. The mystery isn't just whether Atlantis existed. The real rabbit hole is in the details: what it was, how it worked, and what really happened to it. Some accounts describe a utopia powered by mysterious energy sources, protected by technology that sounds suspiciously like science fiction. Anti-gravity ships, energy crystals, even genetic manipulation. It's as if someone fast-forwarded 10,000 years and accidentally dropped a laptop in the Stone Age. And the architecture? Supposedly concentric rings of land and water, a mathematically perfect layout, radiating outward like a Fibonacci hurricane. Not bad for people who, according to mainstream timelines, shouldn't have even had writing yet. Here's where it gets darker. Across the globe, at roughly the same period 12,000 years ago, massive changes struck Earth. Sea levels rose dramatically. Ice caps melted. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a comet or asteroid struck the planet, unleashing a global cataclysm. If Atlantis was real, it wouldn't have stood a chance. But the echoes are everywhere. In flood myths from nearly every culture. In underwater ruins off the coasts of India, Japan, the Bahamas. In oral traditions passed down from millennia that speak of a drowned kingdom and a vanished people. Could it all be coincidence? Could Plato have simply invented a cautionary tale and accidentally aligned with geological events we're only now beginning to understand? Or was he writing down something older? A story that survived the flood? A whisper from before the deluge? A warning? And while you're trying to wrap your head around a drowned civilization possibly more advanced than our own, let's jump to something even more mysterio. Show the hell did early humans suddenly become Michelangelo in caves overnight? The origin of Cro-magnon man's art. Picture this. You're in a dark cave, thousands of years before writing, cities, or even the invention of farming. The world outside is brutal saber-toothed cats, ice sheets, and starvation. But deep inside the cave, someone has just painted a horse. And it's not just a horse, it's perfect, in motion. Powerful, Anatomically correct. Lit by flickering torchlight, it gallops through the stone like a ghost from the future. Welcome to the artistic explosion of Cro-magnon man. Somewhere around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens in Europe started creating art that makes modern artists look like finger-painting toddlers. We're talking the Lascaux caves, Chauvet, Altamira, not crude sketches, but dynamic murals, mythic animals, symbolic shapes, even 3D illusions using the contours of the cave walls. This isn't trial and error stuff. This is mastery. And here's the real mystery. There's no warm-up. Humanity goes from making hand axes and survival tools to suddenly unleashing a full-blown renaissance in a cave. No clear transition, no slow build-up, just boom, art, genius. Out of nowhere. What sparked this creative detonation? Some say it was the emergence of symbolic thinking. Others blame psychedelics, spiritual rituals, or a sudden leap in brain function. But none of these theories answer the real question. Why then? Why that sudden surge of imagination after hundreds of thousands of years of stone monotony? Then there's the creepier possibility. What if Cro-magnon man didn't do it alone? Some researchers point to a mysterious uptick in cognitive abilities that can't be accounted for by slow evolution. Did something or someone intervene? Were we taught? Was something inherited? Or worse, remembered? Even the content of the art is suspiciously layered. The animals are detailed, reverent. But the human figures? Crude, stick-like, like they weren't allowed to paint themselves or didn't dare. And when you stare at these ancient masterpieces long enough, another idea starts to creep in. Maybe this wasn't just decoration. Maybe it was data, code, religion, a desperate transmission through time. Whatever it was, the art appeared and never left. From that moment, humans were no longer just survivors. We were storytellers, meaning makers, architects of myth. But just as these Cro-magnon artists were stepping into the light of human creativity, another mysterious branch of the human family tree was quietly fading into the shadows, leaving behind a genetic legacy, a few scraps of bone, and an avalanche of questions. The denisovans. In 2010, scientists found a single fragment of a finger bone in a cave in Siberia. No big deal, right? Except the DNA inside that sliver didn't match Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. It belonged to someone else, a whole other kind of human, unknown, unnamed, extinct. Say hello to the denisovans. We don't know what they looked like. We don't know how they lived. But they were real, and they were smart. Smart enough to survive in brutal Ice Age terrain. Smart enough to breed with both humans and Neanderthals. And smart enough, perhaps, to leave behind more than we've found. From one tiny bone, we've unraveled a story of interbreeding and migration that stretches across Asia and the Pacific. Their DNA shows up in people from Papua New Guinea, in Tibetans, helping them breathe in thin air. Even in you, possibly if you've got Asian or Oceanic ancestry, you're probably part Denisovan. But where are the skeletons? The tools? The art? We've found barely a handful of fossils, a finger, a jawbone, a few teeth. That's it. The rest? Absence. A vanishing act on a global scale. And yet, clues keep popping up. A bracelet made from polished green stone, found in the same cave, intricately drilled, too advanced, some argue, for the time period. Another question mark added to the pile. What if the denisovans weren't just another primitive offshoot? What if they had culture, memory, tradition? What if their knowledge didn't die but was absorbed, quietly, into our own? Some speculate that legends of ancient giants or sky people in Tibetan and Melanesian folklore might trace back to these mysterious ancestors. Is that a stretch? Sure. But so is explaining how an entire species of humans could thrive for hundreds of thousands of years and vanish without a trace, leaving only whispers in our blood. The deeper we dig, the more the past mocks us, not just for what we don't know, but for what we thought we did. And speaking of extinction events wrapped in riddles, let's talk about something else that disappeared in a flash. 10-ton beasts, towering predators, and whole food chains, all wiped off the earth like bad history homework. The extinction of megafauna. What do mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, woolly rhinos, and oversized terror birds have in common? They all vanished. Roughly 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the earth was a playground for giants. Herds of enormous mammals thundered across frozen plains. Predators the size of compact cars prowled in their wake. And then gone. Not over millennia, over centuries, sometimes decades. Boom. Extinction. Science blames two usual suspects: climate change and humans. Temperatures warmed, glaciers retreated, habitats shifted. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens, now armed with tools, fire, and maybe even dogs, spread into every corner of the world like a viral event. The timing lines up suspiciously well. Wherever we went, the megafauna didn't last much longer. But is it that simple? In North America, mammoths had survived countless glacial cycles. They adapted. They were resilient. And then, they weren't. Similar patterns played out in Australia, Eurasia, and South America. In some cases, animals vanished before significant human populations even arrived. Something else was at work. The Younger Dryas impact theory again rears its icy head. According to some researchers, a comet or asteroid strike around 12,800 years ago may have triggered global wildfires, atmospheric chaos, and ecological collapse. Instant climate reset, megafauna barbecue. But then, there are the strange remains carcasses, flash frozen in permafrost, stomachs full of summer grass, suggesting sudden death in what should have been a thriving environment. There are mass graves, piles of bones that don't suggest natural decay but violent events. And finally, there are the myths. Every culture has them stories of monstrous beasts, skyfire, and the end of a world. Oral memories passed down for millennia. Could those be remnants of real events? First-hand accounts of the last mammoths falling, the skies turning black, the earth reshuffling the deck? We don't know. All we have are bones, burned layers in the soil, and a sense that something huge literally was lost, a moment when nature blinked and the giants never returned. But perhaps their memory lingered. In stories, in fears, in reverence, and maybe even encoded into the myths of the people who followed the same people who started telling bizarre, cryptic stories about rainbow serpents, skywalkers, and dreamtime realms. The purpose of Aboriginal dreamtime stories. Australia's Aboriginal dreamtime stories are not bedtime fairy tales. They're cosmic blueprints. These ancient narratives stretch back tens of thousands of years, oral histories passed from generation to generation with frightening precision. They tell of creation, of gods and monsters, of heroes walking the sky, and serpents burrowing rivers into the land. At first glance, they read like mythology. But lean in closer, and something stranger emerges. Some dreamtime stories describe landscapes that no longer exist. River systems that dried up millennia ago, volcanic eruptions that happened 10,000 years back, coastlines that vanished beneath rising seas. All remembered, all mapped in song. How? These stories survived without writing, without books, without any tools of preservation other than memory. Yet they hold geological and astronomical data we're only now beginning to verify. They're story maps, tools for survival, navigation, and cultural identity. But they're also something more. Some researchers believe dreamtime narratives might encode memories of real-world events, giant floods, meteor impacts, mass extinctions, stories of stars falling from the sky, the world burning, the oceans rising to swallow the land. The rainbow serpent, a recurring figure in dreamtime lore, is said to have carved valleys and rivers, its sinuous body shaping the earth itself. Some interpret this as a symbolic explanation of tectonic movement or glacial melting. Others say it's a coded record of a post-Ice Age flood, one that reshaped not just the earth but human memory. Then there are the beings, Stahl, luminous, powerful, who come from the stars, or from deep underground. The kind of entities you'd expect to find in science fiction, not in the oral tradition of a people isolated from the rest of the world for over 40,000 years. Are these metaphors? Maybe, but the timing and consistency across thousands of miles of outback are uncanny. Maybe dreamtime isn't about dreams at all. Maybe it's history in disguise. Ancient eyewitness accounts, stylized through generations until they became cosmic poetry. And while the rest of the ancient world was scratching out existence on the edge of extinction, the people of Australia were whispering legends into the void, stories about floods, fire, and skywalkers. Stories that start to look a little too familiar when you find eerily similar accounts chiseled into caves halfway across the planet. The Bhimbetka rock shelters age. Tucked into the forested cliffs of central India lie the Bhimbetka rock shelter, hundreds of caves etched with the fingerprints of prehistoric genius. These aren't just shelters, they're museums of time. Every surface is alive with images, hunting scenes, dancing figures, giant animals, even geometric patterns. And the kicker? Some of them may be over 30,000 years old. Others are even older. How old? Try 100,000 years, maybe more. Let that sink in. While most of the world was still trying to figure out fire, someone in the Indian subcontinent was decorating walls with deliberate, creative, expressive forms. Not random scratches. Not accident. Art. Some of the paintings are simple, red ochre outlines, stick figures, but others show astonishing sophistication, multiple colors, shading techniques, narrative sequences. And here's where it gets weird. They span different time periods. It's not one wave of creativity, it's dozens. Generations upon generations return to these caves, building on the past, refining the style, a living archive. But here's the mystery. How did this start so early? What drove ancient humans, or proto-humans, to spend precious energy making art deep inside caves, where sunlight doesn't reach? These weren't doodles. They had to grind pigments, mix them, use tools, climb walls. This took planning, culture, memory. And unlike the better-known European cave art, Bhimbetka isn't just animal worship. There are abstract symbols here, concentric circles, grids, maze-like etchings. Some archaeologists believe they might represent astronomical patterns, tribal emblems, or something else entirely. The age is what breaks brains. The longer we study Bhimbetka, the further back we push the timeline of human consciousness. These shelters are older than written history by tens of thousands of years. Older than pyramids, ziggurats, or megaliths. They predate farming. They might even predate modern humans. And yet they pulse with intention. Who painted them? What were they trying to say? Why did this urge to record and reflect emerge so early, so suddenly, and with such technical ability? It's not just the paintings. The surrounding region is littered with tool sachs, blades, drills. Evidence of continuous human presence stretching into the mists of deep time. This wasn't a fluke. This was a hub. And as if prehistoric art pushing the limits of time wasn't enough, just off the coast of another ancient culture lies something even more surreal, a sunken city where gods were said to walk, the underwater city of Dwarka. Off the coast of Gujarat, India, divers found something that shouldn't exist. Deep beneath the Arabian Sea lies a submerged ruin, streets, walls, stepped platforms, and what might be temples or doxal carved from stone, all lying under meters of water. Welcome to Dwarka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna, swallowed by the sea in Hindu epics. For centuries, it was thought to be just that, a myth, a poetic metaphor, until sonar scans and underwater archaeology hinted otherwise. The ruins are real. The layout is real. And the age? Possibly older than 9,000 years. If that's true, then this city predates Sumer, predates Egypt, predates history itself. The Mahabharata describes Dwarka as a bustling metropolis with shining palaces, flying chariots, and god-kings with supernatural power. Hyperbole? Probably. But then you start finding right angles beneath the surf, grid-like street patterns, man-made foundations. Suddenly the myth doesn't seem so mythical. Even stranger, the site isn't alone. Submerged ruins have been found up and down India's coastline, some even further inland, suggesting entire regions were drowned. Sea level rise at the end of the last ice age could have done this. But here's the twist. These tales remembered it. Texts written thousands of years ago describe cities swallowed by rising seas. They don't just get the event right, they get the location right. How? And if Dwarka was real, and it really sank during a catastrophic flood, what else might be real? The flying machines, the energy weapons, the godlike beings? Mainstream archaeology dismisses these interpretations, and fair enough diving into scripture for blueprints is a slippery slope. But even when stripped of supernatural flair, the ruins remain. And they point to a civilization that lived, built, thrived and drowned long before anyone thought civilization could even exist. This isn't Atlantis light. It's something older. Indian texts didn't whisper about Dwarka, they named it, described it in detail, and warned of its end. And just like that, the ground shifts beneath our feet. Again. Because if entire cities can hide under the sea, what else is buried under centuries of disbelief? Maybe answers, or maybe more questions. Like the ones wrapped around a set of skulls, long, heavy, and haunting, that turn up in the deserts of Peru. The Paracas skulls. In the sun-scorched deserts of southern Peru, a cemetery was unearthed that shouldn't have existed. Inside lay dozens of skulls, elongated, bulbous, and bizarre. Meet the Paracas skulls. These aren't your average ancient remains. The skulls are stretched vertically, giving them a distinctly alien look. Not just longer, but different, heavier, thicker. In some cases, the volume of cranial capacity is significantly greater than that of a typical human skull. Some have fewer cranial sutures, the seams that fuse the skull plates. Some have anomalies in the foramen magnum, the hole where the spine connects to the head. In short, these skulls weren't just shaped differently, they may have been built differently. Mainstream archaeology has a standard response: cranial deformation. Cultures around the world have practiced head binding, wrapping an infant's skull in cloth or wood to shape it as it grows. True. It's documented. But the Paracas skulls push this theory to its breaking point. Binding can reshape a skull, yes, but it doesn't add mass. It doesn't reduce suture lines. It doesn't change the biology. And yet, here we are faced with dozens of skulls that don't quite fit the mold. Some DNA tests have been conducted unofficially, and they suggest something even weirder. Haplogroups not native to South America, European, even Middle Eastern markers. If accurate, that raises a dozen uncomfortable questions. Were these people migrants? Survivors of a lost culture? Something else entirely? The Paracas people were real. Their mummified remains, complex burial techniques, and textiles suggest a sophisticated, deeply spiritual society. But those skulls? They stand apart, like outliers. Or intruders. And it's not just the skull sits, the placement. Peru is also home to the Nazca lines, strange desert geoglyphs visible only from the air, and megalithic constructions that seem impossible for a Bronze Age culture. When you connect the dots, a strange picture starts to form. A region steeped in anomalies, forgotten wisdom, and silent ruins. Maybe the Paracas skulls were just a cultural quirk taken to extremes. Or maybe they were remnants, genetic echoes of something ancient and deliberately obscured. But as the desert winds sweep over these graves, the question lingers. If these weren't humans exactly like us, what were they? And speaking of baffling artifacts from Peru, the next mystery looks like a hoax, feels like a hoax, smells like a hoax, but the images carved into stone are too weird to completely ignore. The Ica stones. Imagine this, a smooth, black stone, small enough to hold in one hand. On its polished surface, an image etched with surgical precision shows a man performing brain surgery. Another depicts men using telescopes. Another, a human riding a dinosaur. Welcome to the Ica stones. Thousands of these carved rocks have surfaced in the deserts near Ica, Peru, sparking furious debate since the 1960s. They seem to depict scenes utterly impossible for their supposed age prehistoric humans coexisting with dinosaurs, advanced medical procedures, maps of lost continents, even what some interpret as star charts or flying machines. It's easy to scoff. Many have. Local farmers confess to faking some of the stones for profit, crafting images with drills and acid aging. Case closed, right? Not quite. Because some of the stones defy easy dismissal. Their carvings are deep and smooth, not scratched like modern tools would leave. Some stones were unearthed in sealed tombs. Some show mineral buildup in the grooves, something hard to fake. And a few match anatomical and technological details that shouldn't have been known until centuries later. So, what are we looking at? One possibility is that these are genuine ancient artifacts, created by a lost civilization with knowledge that shouldn't have existed, possibly preserved memories from a pre-flood world. Another, they're a modern hoax built atop older, authentic pieces, a layered deception, a forgery on top of truth. And then there's the psychological angle, pareidolia. We see what we want to see. A crude lizard becomes a T, Rex. A circle becomes a planet. Maybe we're just projecting. But that's the uncomfortable brilliance of the Ica stones. They play with our sense of historical certainty. They force us to ask whether we're really looking at evidence or just desperate for a deeper mystery. Even if they're all fake, why these images? Why dinosaurs, telescopes, brain surgery? What cultural memory or myth did they come from? Could they be distorted echoes of something real passed down across generations, misremembered, misrepresented? Hoax or Holy Grail? The Ica stones remind us that history is only ever one misinterpreted artifact away from turning upside down. And speaking of upside down, how did a Sumerian-looking bowl end up in Bolivia? The Fuente Magna Bowl. Discovered near Lake Titicaca, the Fuente Magna Bowl is a ceramic artifact that looks like it should be in Mesopotamia, not South America. It's a big, round bowl, inscribed on the inside with two types of script. One appears to be Proto-Sumerian cuneiform. The other resembles a form of pre-Sumerian writing. Together, they form a riddle. How did a bowl inscribed with Near Eastern language end up on the opposite side of the planet? Let's be clear, this shouldn't be possible. According to every accepted timeline, the Sumerians and the indigenous peoples of the Andes had no contact. No shared trade routes, no ocean-spanning empires. They were separated by thousands of miles of ocean, with no known ships capable of such a journey during the time the Sumerians were active. And yet, there it is, a bowl, with unmistakably ancient Near Eastern inscriptions. Is it a hoax? Possibly. It wouldn't be the first artifact planted for fame or fortune. But again, the craftsmanship, the wear, and the layering of mineral deposits suggest antiquity. Some scholars have argued the writing may be legitant. If so, it would completely rewrite the story of ancient global interaction. One theory is that ancient seafarers did cross oceans long before Columbus or the Vikings. That civilizations like the Sumerians, Egyptians, or Phoenicians may have reached the Americas and left breadcrumbs behind. Another idea? These weren't Sumerians at all, but a shared root culture, now lost. An even older civilization from which both Sumerians and pre-Columbians descended. The bowl, then, is a fossil, a relic from a pre-flood world that seeded civilizations before sinking beneath the sea. Or maybe it's the greatest prank in archaeological history. That's the trick with these kinds of finds. You're never quite sure where reality ends and mythology begins. But whether it was carried by traders, refugees, or storm-driven ships from a forgotten empire, the Fuente Magna Bowl forces us to ask a wild question. What if history didn't unfold in isolation? And to test that idea, we'll travel next to a windswept site in Canada where Viking ships, old myths, and a centuries-old anomaly refuse to stay buried. The Meadows anomaly. In the far reaches of Newfoundland, where icy winds whip through salt-soaked pines and the Atlantic crashes like an ancient heartbeat, a quiet patch of turf holds one of the most mind-shattering archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. Meadows. Officially, it's a Viking settlement. Dated to around 1000 CE, it's the first confirmed pre-Columbian European presence in North America. Before Columbus. Before the age of exploration. Norse explorers, possibly led by Leif Erikson, built sod houses here, forged iron, lived, left. But that's just the surface. What makes Meadows an anomaly isn't just its existence. It's the implications buried beneath the frost. You see, the Norse were never supposed to be here. Their ships weren't supposed to make it across the Atlantic in any meaningful, repeatable way. Yet they did. And not only did they survive, they thrived long enough to construct, trade, and possibly explore deeper inland. But here's where it gets stranger. Some artifacts at the site don't quite fit the Viking profile. Tools, materials, and construction styles that hint at extended contact. Some even argue there were interactions with pre-existing indigenous cultures, perhaps even exchanges of knowledge or technology. There are tales passed down through native oral tradition of tall, bearded men arriving from the sea, bearing metal and strange customs. More provocatively, there are rumors of additional Norse sites further south, yet to be confirmed or conveniently ignored. Could Meadows have been just one node in a web of North Atlantic crossings stretching far deeper into the continent? Then there's the global angle. Around the same time, other anomalies pop up: runestones in Minnesota, Old World-style petroglyphs in West Virginia, and, yes, the infamous Vinland maps. Most are contested, some are hoaxes, but the coincidences pile up. What if Meadows wasn't just a fluke but a footnote to a much larger chapter? A chapter in which seafaring cultures, whether Viking or older, still crisscross the oceans, leaving behind traces that didn't fit the official story and so were dismissed. And if human footprints can crisscross oceans earlier than we thought, what happens when those same footprints turn up millions of years out of place? The impossible footprints. Let's take a walk through time. Literally. Scattered across the world are a handful of haunting impressions, not fossils of animals, not prints of shuffling primates, but distinctly human-like footprints, complete with arches, heels, and toe alignments stamped into geological layers that are supposed to predate human existence by millions of years. Texas, Mexico, Tanzania, even the Appalachian foothills, these impossible footprints have shown up in stone that's supposed to date from the Mesozoic, the Pliocene, even the Carboniferous. That's before Homo sapiens, before hominids, in some cases before dinosaurs even evolved. So, what gives? Mainstream science usually explains these anomalies as misinterpretations, erosion patterns, animal prints that just happen to look human. And in many cases, they're right. The human brain loves to find patterns where none exist. But a few of these prints refuse to be waved away. One example appears to show a sandaled foot complete with visible stitching embedded in Cambrian limestone, supposedly over 500 million years old. Another, found near Glen Rose, Texas, is reportedly next to dinosaur tracks, suggesting either a hoax of biblical proportions or something far stranger. Enter the fringe theories. Some claim these are evidence of time travelers. Others propose a lost civilization with technology so advanced they predated history itself and then disappeared without a trace, leaving only footprints behind. The wildest theory? That Earth's history is cyclical, with multiple rises and collapses of intelligent species, some of whom looked a lot like us. And here's the thing, these ideas aren't born from fantasy. They emerge from real footprints, real impressions in rock. Physical evidence you can measure, touch, photograph and argue about until your voice cracks. Are they fakes? Possibly. Are they misunderstood? Likely. But one inconvenient truth persists. Enough of these anomalies exist that we can't quite brush them all aside. If even one is real, it nukes our entire timeline. It means humancer, something eerily close existed millions of years ago, with no skeletons, no cities, no known artifacts. Just vanishing acts, printed in stone. And just when you think it can't get any weirder, the earth yawns open. A pit appears in the tundra, perfectly round, deep, silent. And no one knows what caused it. The mystery of the Siberian craters. In the cold belly of Siberia, where permafrost reigns and the earth feels ancient enough to groan in its sleep, something is happening. Enormous craters circular, clean, and terrifyingly sudden are appearing in the Yamal Peninsula and beyond. Dozens of them. The ground doesn't collapse gradually. It explodes, hurling rock and soil into the sky, leaving behind chasms that look like meteor impact sites or the aftermath of buried bombs. Scientists blame methane. As permafrost melts due to rising temperatures, methane trapped in ice pockets expands. Pressure builds, then boom, an eruption from below. But that's just one version of the story. Some locals report strange lights and sounds before the craters form. Others claim these pits mark the return of ancient spirits or the breath of a sleeping god. Siberian folklore is littered with tales of sudden earth openings, swallowed villages, and monsters that live below. And then there's the geometry. The craters aren't irregular, they're nearly perfect circles, deep shafts bored into earth with no scorching, no lava, no tectonic disruption, just a violent, vertical void. Some go down hundreds of feet, and some are widening. Geologists study them, satellites track them, but no one truly understands what sets them off. Why here? Why now? And what might still be lurking in those yawning darks? There's an unsettling idea gaining traction that these craters aren't entirely new, that something similar happened long ago, that methane was only the trigger, not the cause. Could they be relics of ancient technologies buried beneath the permafrost, the remnants of lost facilities, or even ancient venting systems from a civilization long forgotten? Maybe that's reaching. Or maybe, once again, we're underestimating what the Earth is hiding. Because from the depths of Siberia to the canyons of the American Southwest, ancient rock art tells stories no one expected. Stories that, bizarrely, seem to involve creatures that should have been extinct for 65 million years. The pterodactyl-like rock carvings. In the arid silence of the American Southwest, across desert plains and canyon walls, are petroglyphs that shouldn't exist. Scratched into rock faces by ancient hands, they depict the usual fair bighorn sheep, humans, snakes, solar symbols, and then something else. Wings outstretched, long beaks, crest-shaped skulls, reptilian tails. In other words, pterosaurs. Yes, pterosaurs, those flying reptiles of the Mesozoic, extinct for over 65 million years. How could ancient peoples, without access to fossils or paleontology, have carved such accurate depictions? That's the mystery. Some of the rock art, particularly those in Utah and New Mexico, seem too specific. Not just generic birds or dragons, but forms bearing uncanny resemblance to creatures like pteranodon or Quetzalcoatlus massive wingspans, long toothy jaws, and distinctive head crests. Mainstream archaeologists offer familiar answers. Misinterpretation. The creatures are stylized birds, perhaps cranes or herons, or mythological beasts born from imagination, not observation. And yet, some of these carvings predate the discovery of dinosaur fossils by centuries, millennia even. The implications are disturbing. If ancient artists really saw creatures resembling pterosaurs, there are only a few unsettling options. 1. These animals survived far longer than science currently accepts. 2. The carvings were somehow inspired by long-lost oral traditions or fossil discoveries that made their way into myth. Or 3. We're not dealing with a simple timeline. Could these be echoes of a civilization that retained knowledge of extinct life forms? Or were they visitors from elsewhere or elsewhen who brought strange creatures with them? Some fringe researchers point to global similarities. Cave art in Africa, textiles in Peru, engravings in Southeast Asia, all depicting flying reptiles long extinct. Coincidence? Archetypes buried deep in the collective human psyche? Or fragments of a forgotten era? We don't know. But as these creatures flap across sandstone walls, their message remains. Either ancient memory is far deeper than we believe, or the past was home to things that simply shouldn't have been there. And speaking of things out of place, in the hills of California, beneath layers of soil untouched for ages, lies evidence of something even more absurd than ancient hunger for gold. The ancient anomaly of gold in California. California, land of gold rushes, sun-bleached dreams, and tech billionaires. But long before pickaxes and prospectors, there may have been another gold rush shown that predates known history. In the 19th century, miners in the Sierra Nevada region unearthed something they couldn't explain. Deep in the bedrock, sometimes hundreds of feet down, they found tools, hammers, mortars, pestles, all embedded in geological layers that were supposedly millions of years old. And they found gold. Not just nuggets, but veins untouched, untapped, yet clearly within reach of anyone who knew where to dig. The implication? Something might have known about California's treasure long before Sutter's Mill set off a stampede. The evidence was so disturbing, many museums quietly locked it away. Some artifacts disappeared. Others were dismissed as misplacements, hoaxes, or the result of mining accidents. But there were too many findings, across too many mines, to write them all off. Who could have been mining here, tens of thousands, possibly millions of years ago? That's the core of the mystery. Some theories suggest a lost civilization, maybe predating the last ice age. Others propose visitors from across the sea or beyond the stars who came not for conquest, but for resources. Ancient texts from other parts of the world speak of gods who prized gold, who taught mining to early humans. Could California have been one of their outposts? The native legends don't help, or rather, they help too much. Some tribes speak of star people who descended to teach, to dig, to shine light on the land, beings with knowledge and hunger. And gold, shimmering and sacred, was often at the center of their myths. Mainstream historians scoff. They point to geological anomalies, disturbed strata, and the natural tendency of rivers to shuffle things around. Maybe. But those old miners, rough, sunburned, and skeptical, weren't the types to confuse a modern hammer with ancient rock. So maybe we have it backward. Maybe the 1849 gold rush wasn't the first. Maybe it was just the second, round stirred up by memory, myth, or magnetic pull. A spark reigniting an ancient obsession. And what if those early gold hunters weren't wanderers but migrants, crossing the land bridge from Asia into the Americas? That mysterious strip of vanished earth called Beringia. The enigmatic Beringia land bridge. Stretching from Siberia to Alaska like a phantom road, the Beringia land bridge was a life linear, a trap. Today it's drowned beneath the Bering Strait, but during the Ice Age, it stood exposed, a vast corridor of tundra and grassland, possibly 1,000 miles wide. It's the most accepted theory for how humans reached the Americas. Simple. Follow the mammoths, cross the bridge, boom, new world. But as with all things ancient and vital, the truth is much messier. For starters, Beringia wasn't just a frozen highway. It was a thriving ecosystem. Plants, animals, maybe even entire settlements could have existed there for thousands of years. It may have been a homeland, not just a passage. That's where things get weird. Despite its supposed role in peopling the Americas, Beringia has yielded surprisingly few human remains. Tools? Rare. Settlements? Sparse. Almost as if the entire population vanished once they crossed over, or was never there in the first place. And then there's the timing. Conventional wisdom says humans crossed around 13,000 years ago. But newer finds in both North and South America suggest people were here much earlier, perhaps 20,000, even 30,000 years ago. If that's true, Beringia's role becomes less a bridge, more a mystery. Either people crossed it way earlier than expected, or they came from somewhere else entirely. Some propose coastal migration boats hugging the ice-clad shorelines. Others whisper about lost civilizations wiped out by rising seas, their evidence now buried beneath the waves of the North Pacific. And then there are the legends. Siberian and Alaskan tribes speak of a land that vanished, a place where the sky touched the earth, where beings of great power came and went. Some even describe the land bridge not just as a path, but as a realm, a world between worlds. So what was Beringia really? A route? A civilization? A memory? Its silence is deafening. No cities, no temples, just permafrost and bone sand, a feeling that something enormous passed through and was never seen again. And the next mystery makes that silence louder. Proof that humans weren't just here earlier than expected, they were here way earlier, long before Beringia even formed. The Pre-clovis settlement of the Americas. For decades, the story of the first Americans was simple. They were the Clovis people. Big game hunters who arrived about 13,000 years ago, wielding sharp, fluted spear points and chasing mammoths across the plains. They came through the Bering land bridge, filtered south through an ice-free corridor, and spread across the continent like wildfire. Except they didn't. Clovis first has crumbled. What's replacing it is stranger, older, and far more difficult to explain. All across the Americas, sites have emerged that break the Clovis timeline. Monte Verde in Chile, Buttermilk Creek in Texas, Meadowcroft in Pennsylvania, Cerruti in California. These sites show signs of human presence, not just before Clovis thousands of years before. In some cases, tens of thousands. Stone tools, fire pits, animal bones with clear butchery marks, even footprints, and the dates? Some stretch back to 20,000 years ago. Oath, 30,000 rupees. A few, if you're brave enough to believe them, 50,000 or more. This blows the migration model to pieces. You don't get from Siberia to southern Chile in a few centuries on foot. Which means either people came much earlier than we thought, or they didn't come through Beringia at all. The coastal migration theory gets traction: boats hugging the shorelines, settlements popping up along the Pacific Rim. But even that doesn't fully account for the age or dispersion of these pre-Clovis sites. So who were they? Ghost populations? Proto-Americans? Possibly a now extinct branch of Homo sapiens, or a group that was absorbed and forgotten. Some speculate multiple migrations. Others whisper of seafarers from Asia, Oceania, even Europe who made it across oceans long before history permits. There's even genetic evidence, traces of DNA in ancient remains that don't match Siberian ancestry but suggest older, more diverse lineages. But the strongest evidence isn't genetic, it's archaeological. charcoal in ancient hearths, stone points buried beneath undisturbed layers, bones split with surgical precision. If Clovis wasn't first, then the real first Americans are a vanished people with no name. Their bones may lie beneath cities, beneath lakes, or buried under ice. Their stories are gone. But the artifacts remain, breaking the timeline open like a dropped hourglass. And just when you think the rabbit hole ends with scattered bones and broken tools, you stumble across something totally unexplainable. Perfectly round stone spheres in the jungles of Central America, so smooth, so precise, they might as well have been made with machines. The giant spheres of Costa Rica. Deep in the Costa Rican jungle, half swallowed by moss and vines, are giant stones, fairish hundreds of them. Ranging from the size of a baseball to boulders weighing over 15 tons, these spheres are almost perfectly round. Not kind of spherical, perfectly. They're made of granodiorite type of stone, not native to where they were found. Some were transported miles. Others are grouped in strange alignments, clustered in patterns that suggest celestial layouts or forgotten rituals. And here's the punchline. No one knows who made them or why. They were first discovered in the 1930s by United Fruit Company, workers clearing jungle for banana plantations. Since then, they've baffled archaeologists. There are no written records, no carvings, no cultural context, just the spheresmooth, heavy, silent. Mainstream theory says they were created by the Dickies culture around 600 CE, using stone hammers and painstaking abrasion. Sure, maybe. But how do you make a 15-ton granite ball with that kind of precision, without lathes, without measuring tools, without machines? Some of the spheres are so geometrically exact that even modern sculptors struggle to replicate them. Then there's the alignments. Some clusters point toward solstices, others match stellar constellations. Still others seem random, or perhaps they follow a logic we no longer understand. Theories abound. Navigation markers, status symbols, astronomical devices. Some say they represent the planets. Others believe they were used in a game war as tools of spiritual or political power. And of course, the fringe ideas. Alien artifacts. Atlantean leftovers. Relics of a pre-flood civilization with technology lost to time. What gives these ideas traction is the lack of context. No city nearby, no quarry with half-finished spheres, no blueprints. It's as if they appeared fully formed, then were abandoned. And even more curiously, the moment modern attention turned toward them, they started vanishing. Stolen, blasted, reburied. Many are now lost to history. But the surviving ones remain unblinking, enigmatic, and defiantly round. Silent reminders that even in the jungles of Central America, the rules of history can curve in on themselves. And if you're thinking, well, maybe they rolled them down a hill, buckle up. Because next, we're heading to a place where ancient stone tracks cut deep into bedrock, like the world's oldest train lines mysterious, massive, and maddeningly unexplained. The Maltese cart ruts. Malta. A sun-baked island fortress in the Mediterranean, home to some of the oldest freestanding structures on Earth. But among its ancient wonders lies something stranger. Tracks carved into solid limestone twisting, intersecting, and vanishing off cliffs. They're called cart ruts, but that's just a label. No one knows what they really are. The ruts are deep, sometimes up to 24 inches, and often spaced too closely together for any known wheeled vehicle. They crisscross the island, carving the landscape into a kind of prehistoric railroad. In some places, they run into the ocean. In others, they disappear into stone quarries or abruptly dead end in flat terrain. And they're old. Very old. Some archaeologists date them to the Bronze Age, others argue for Neolithic origins. But the rock they're carved into limestone roads, slowly, suggesting the ruts could be tens of thousands of years old, far older than any civilization supposed to have had carts at all. So what made them? The prevailing theory is that wooden carts laden with stone or goods wore the grooves down over time. But that doesn't add up. The ruts cut deep into rock, not soft soil. Wooden wheels couldn't do that without disintegrating. And why would multiple sets of parallel tracks go off-road, uphill, or into the sea? Another theory suggests sledges dragged by ropes. But again, why such precision? Why such repetition? And why so many? Some align with ancient temple sites. Others run in parallel across hills and valleys, like the remains of forgotten infrastructure. A lost transport system? An ancient engineering marvel? Fringe researchers take it further, suggesting advanced technology, lost civilizations, or even anti-gravity vehicles that carved paths into stone. Sounds absurd until you see the perfect spacing, the unnatural depth, the sudden cliffside drops. Whatever made them, the cart ruts defy logic. They were carved with intent, with purpose. But that purpose is gone scrubbed from memory, erased from records. Today, tourists walk them, sheep graze over them, the island moves on. But the stone remembers. And those tracks lead us straight to the next enigma, where the sea itself became a battlefield, a force of collapse, a time when entire empires fell to a faceless enemy who came from the waves. The Sea People mystery. Imagine this. The ancient world is on fire. Around 1200 BCE, every major civilization in the eastern Mediterranean gone. The Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Ugarit kingdom, even parts of Egypt toppled like dominoes. Cities burned. Palaces fell. Trade routes shattered. Writing systems vanished. It was the Bronze Age collapse, and at the center of the chaos was a ghost army, an unnamed, unknowable enemy. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples. They came from the waves, in ships, wielding weapons unknown, fighting like no other force seen before. Pharaoh Ramses III battled them and barely survived. His inscriptions show scenes of war, boats locked in combat, foreign warriors leaping ashore. He named their tribes the Shurden, the Peliset, the Equishbut. Even then, their origins were a mystery. Where did they come from? Nobody knows. Some theories say they were displaced Indo-European migrants fleeing drought or famine. Others claim they were mercenaries turned against their masters. Some speculate they were raiders from the Aegean, or even survivors from the lost civilization of Atlantis driven to desperate conquest by some forgotten cataclysm. But here's the strangest part. They didn't just attack, they erased. Entire cultures blinked out. Languages died. Populations scattered. In some places, not even ruins remained, just burnt soil and silence. The Sea Peoples were less an invading army and more a civilizational reset button. And then just like that, they vanished. No empire, no capital, no written records of their own, no trace of where they went or who they really were. They came like a tide and receded just as fast. Were they a coalition of desperate refugees? A rogue military alliance? A group guided by some ancient grudge? Or were they something older? Something engineered? Perhaps descendants of a culture that predated the Bronze Age, emerging from the dark to reset the board? Whatever their true identity, the Sea Peoples left behind the kind of mystery that feels deliberate, like someone wanted the past erased. And speaking of ancient megaliths, resets, and things that make absolutely no logistical sense, let's shift our gaze to the world's scattered stone graves and ritual rings monuments to the dead that whisper in the dark, the dolmens and cromlech's purpose. Dotting the hillsides of Europe, Asia, and beyond are stone structures that look like prehistoric architecture from a dream. Massive horizontal slabs balanced atop upright stones dolmens. Rings of standing stones, sometimes crude, sometimes elegant cromlechs. They appear in Korea, France, Russia, Ireland, Jordan, India, everywhere. No blueprints, no writing, just stone and silence. Dolmens are often labeled as tombs. That's the standard narrative. But many contain no bones, no grave goods. Some are empty chambers, long sealed. Others have traces of fire, not decay. Were they burial places or something else? Cromlechs, like their cousin Stonehenge, are thought to be ritual sites, astronomical calendars, places of seasonal observance. But some lie in places where the sun doesn't align. Others appear to serve no geometric function, and in many cases, their builders remain unknown. Prehistoric cultures that left behind no names, no histories, no explanations. The stones themselves defy logic, transported from miles away, shaped with tools we're not sure existed at the time. Some weigh over 50 tons, lifted, balanced, positioned with mathematical precision. Why go to such effort? Some believe these structures were ceremonial centers, used to honor the dead or connect with the divine. Others propose they were energy hub nodes in some forgotten Earth grid, designed to amplify or regulate electromagnetic forces. A few fringe voices suggest they were landing markers for something that came from above. But the real power of dolmens and cromlechs lies in their persistence. These aren't isolated oddities, they're a global phenomenon. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia built nearly identical structures. Why? Coincidence? Collective intuition? Or were they following a forgotten blueprint? And then there's the shape. The portal-like design of dolmens their doorway form has led many to speculate that they symbolized a passage between worlds, life and death, earth and sky, past and future. So maybe they weren't just tombs. Maybe they were keys, interfaces, stone machines carved by hands that knew something we don't. And while we're on the subject of ancient anomalies spread far and wide, let's pivot to something less tangible but no less confounding, a language that shouldn't exist, yet somehow does. The origin of the Basque language. In the shadow of the Pyrenees, tucked between Spain and France, lives a language that refuses to be explained. Euskara Baskis, a linguistic orphan, a rebel, a survivor. It has no known relatives, no sister tongues. It doesn't belong to the Indo-European family which dominates Europe. It's not Semitic, not Uralic, not anything. It's just there. Linguists have pored over its grammar, syntax, phonetics. Nothing matches. The Basque language is a dead end in the forest of human speech, a living fossil that predates the trees around it. Theories swirl like mist over the Pyrenees. Some say Basque is the last survivor of the languages spoken in Europe before Indo-European migration steamrolled the continent. A holdout, a time capsule from 10,000 years ago, maybe more. Others stretch further. What if Basque isn't just old but alien to Europe? A migrant tongue from across the seas? A relic of an earlier global culture now lost beneath oceans and forgotten wars? There's genetic evidence, too. The Basque people have unique markers, higher frequencies of certain blood types, traits that diverge from neighboring populations, isolation or inheritance. And then there are the Basque myth stories of sky beings, underworlds, and powerful female deities who control nature itself. Echoes of a belief system that feels ancient, primal, and off-script compared to classical European pantheons. What if Euskara isn't just a linguistic anomaly, but a clue? A breadcrumb? What if it preserves concepts and structures from a civilization predating known history? What if that civilization, like the language, was wiped clean, save for a stubborn outpost tucked in the mountains? We may never know. Euskara keeps its secrets, and so do the people who speak it. But if a single language can defy millennia of conquest and cultural steamrolling, what else might be hiding in plain sight? Let's take it further. From the mechanics of grammar to the mechanics of the mind, next comes the most mind-breaking mystery of all. How did we, as a species, suddenly begin speaking in complete, complex language, seemingly overnight? The sudden appearance of complex language. One moment, our ancestors were grunting and gesturing, making do with pantomime and the occasional meaningful bark. Then, seemingly overnight, they were telling stories. Not just basic danger over there alerts. We're talking metaphor, recursion, myth, jokes, syntax, grammar, tense, full-blown language. What happened? The human brain didn't suddenly double in size. No lightning bolt cracked open our skulls and uploaded a dictionary. Yet, in the archaeological blink of an eye, humans went from tool-wielding mammals to poets and philosophers. This evolutionary leap, arguably the greatest in history, isn't well explained. In fact, it's barely understood. There's no fossil for language. Bones don't record speech, but artifacts do. The sudden bloom of symbolic art, ritual burial, and social complexity all point to one thing: speech. Real, structured, expressive speech. The kind that builds civilizations. So where did it come from? One theory blames mutation, a single genetic glitch in a gene like FOXP2 that allowed complex vocalization. A kind of evolutionary jackpot. One family line develops language, teaches it to its children, and spreads across the globe, replacing everyone else. Another theory leans on social pressure. That language emerged to manage gossip, coordinate hunting, or manipulate rivals. But that doesn't explain the suddenness of it all. And then there's the wild card. What if it didn't evolve? What if it was given? From whom? Don't ask unless you want to veer into ancient astronaut territory. But some cultures hint at a divine or external origin for speech. Gods who taught names, star people who shared wisdom, myths where words are power, gifted from beyond. Regardless, the emergence of complex language didn't just change communication, it changed reality. Time could be discussed, ideas could be preserved, the future could be imagined. It's not just that we started talking, it's how we started, with grammar and structure baked in. There's no known proto-language in the archaeological record, no caveman Esperanto, just the lights flipping on. Once you have language, everything else becomes possible. Law, math, stories, technology, and with it, another question. What were we saying before we started writing things down? Because the deeper we go, the more we find ancient humans doing suspiciously advanced things, like mining metals in Africa thousands of years before anyone should have. The ancient gold miners of Africa. Southern Africa is rich in gold. That much we know. But long before the colonial rush, before the kingdoms of Great Zimbabwe, before written history even arrived, someone was digging. Deep, organized, and in numbers. Scattered across Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa are thousands of ancient gold mines. Not small pits or random scratches, but large-scale excavation sites. Some date back 30,000 years. Others, perhaps even older. Let that sink in. Tens of thousands of years ago, while Europe was still chiseling cave murals, people in Africa were tunneling into the earth for gold. But for what? Gold has no survival utility. You can't eat it. It doesn't help you hunt. Yet these early miners were extracting it in bulk. That implies trade, value systems, possibly even metallurgy. Artifacts found near these mines include tool-spherical stones, hammers, chisel-like implements, suggesting methodical, not haphazard, work. Some shafts go deep into bedrock. Others are aligned with celestial positions. And then there's the oral tradition. Zulu myths speak of the Abantu Abadala, the ancient ones who mined the land under the guidance of gods. Some stories claim these gods came from the stars, seeking Earth's gold. Sound familiar? It should. This overlaps eerily with Mesopotamian myths of the Anunnaki beings obsessed with mining. Of course, mainstream archaeologists scoff. These sites, they argue, are more recent. The dating methods are uncertain, the legends are just legends. But when you see the sheer scale, the volume of sites, the consistency of the mining methods, it's hard to dismiss. This wasn't a one-off. This was a system. And if these people were mining gold 30,000 years ago, then we have to reevaluate everything we think we know about prehistoric Africa. About prehistoric humans, period. Because these weren't just nomads or foragers. They were planners, engineers, possibly merchants, or something more esoteric. Were they building something, trading with someone, or obeying ancient instructions passed down from beings no longer here? Whatever the truth, one thing's clear. The mines are real. The gold was real. And the mystery is still buried beneath layers of sediment and skepticism. But while Africa's mines hum with the echoes of ancient ambition, the hills of Ireland whisper a different tale of mounds, music, and strange beings who vanished into the earth. The Cave of the Cid, fairy mound. Legends. Ireland's landscape is dotted with ancient, earthen mounds-rounded hills that ripple through the green like buried secrets. Some are tombs, some are natural. But in myth, many are something else entirely. Doorways. To the Cid, the realm of the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the mounds. These weren't your average folklore fairies. They were tall, radiant, powerful, masters of music, war, and magic. According to Irish legend, they once ruled the island until a mysterious agreement sent them underground into hidden realms beneath the hills. The entrances, caves, hollow hills, stone circles, and sometimes sound itself. The stories say these beings could phase in and out of visibility, that their passageways opened only during solstices or when certain songs were sung. That time ran differently in their world. A night with the Cid might cost you 100 years on Earth. So what were they, really? Some say gods, demoted to folklore. Others claim they were the last vestiges of an advanced pre-Celtic civilization wiped out in a cataclysm, whose survivors became myths. A few even suggest they weren't human at all, but something older, otherworldly. The caves associated with these stories often lie near Neolithic sites like new grain structures, older than the pyramids, aligned to celestial events with frightening accuracy. Coincidence? And the legends aren't just local. Across the world, in cultures separated by oceans, there are tales of shining people retreating underground. The Hopi speak of ant people, the Hindus of Nagas, the Tibetans of Shambhala, always advanced, luminous beings hiding beneath our feet. The Cave of the Cid, then, might not just be a story. It might be a memory of a time when the earth was shared with others different, dazzling, and now departed. If so, the myths aren't nonsense. They're code, survival data, passed down in the only form left after the flood: song, story, and stone. And speaking of stone, prepare for a structure so massive, so mind-meltingly impossible, that even the strongest theories crumble under its weight. We're heading next to Baalbek, where giants may not be myth. The ponderous stones of Baalbek. Baalbek is a city of paradoxes. Nestled in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, it hosts one of the most enigmatic architectural feats in all of ancient history: the Temple of Jupiter. Roman columns, grand platforms, and crumbling walls stand like echoes of empire. But it's what lies beneath that shatters the mind. At the foundation of this structure are the so-called trilithon, stones, 3 rectangular blocks, each weighing around 800 tons. Let that number simmer. 800 tons. That's the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747. These stones weren't just placed, they were perfectly aligned, lifted, and stacked, like Lego bricks by an ancient hand. Modern cranes would struggle. Ancient Romans? They didn't have cranes that could lift a quarter of that. And yet, these stones were not only moved, they were fitted with precision that leaves no room for mortar. The seams are tighter than anything we can easily replicate today. Who built this platform, and when? The Romans built on top of it. That much is clear. But the megalithic base? Its origin is pre-Roman, pre-Greek, and possibly pre-history. No definitive culture has claimed it. No definitive tools have been found. Just rumors, legends, and stone. One of the stones, dubbed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs an estimated 1,000 tons and still lies in its quarry nearby, partially excavated. Why wasn't it moved? Did something happen mid-construction? Or was it left as a message, an unsolvable riddle? The local legends speak of giants, of fallen angels and pre-flood architects, of a time when beings of immense strength built for purposes now lost. The name Baalbek itself is tied to Baalan, ancient god whose identity morphs across time, from Canaanite deity to something more cosmic and terrifying. Is Baalbek the remnant of a pre-flood civilization? A beacon from an age where the line between myth and machinery didn't exist? Or is it simply what it appears to be, an ancient platform with impossibly big stones left behind by a people who understood gravity better than we do? Whatever the answer, Baalbek doesn't explain itself. It dares you to try. And just when you think you've wrapped your head around giant stones, the earth swallows something much subtler but no less colossal. An entire river, vanished from the map and from memory, dragging whole civilizations down with it. The Saraswati River's sudden disappearance, geological aspects. Mentioned in the Vedas, India's most ancient and sacred texts, the Saraswati River was described as mighty, a vast, flowing force of life, sacred, central to the people, the gods, and the land itself. But here's the problem. Modern maps don't show it. It's not there. For centuries, scholars believed the Saraswati was a mythical Rivera poetic exaggeration or a spiritual metaphor. But satellite imagery and geological studies began painting a different story. The river did exist. It flowed parallel to the Indus, nourishing a region that would eventually host one of humanity's great forgotten civilizations, the Indus Valley. So what happened to it? The prevailing theory is dramatic climate change. Around 1,900 BCE, tectonic shifts redirected the rivers Sorcesta, Sutlej, and Yamuna. Without them, the Saraswati dried up, fast. The fertile basin became desert. Cities along its banks, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and dozens more were abandoned. Civilization crumbled, just like that. But some claim the river's disappearance was more than just bad luck. The geological data suggest sudden, violent changes, fault line ruptures, massive floods, and perhaps even glacial melt interference. Was it a natural cataclysm? Or the ripple effect of something larger, an impact event, global shifts tied to a wider collapse? And what's eerie is how precise the Vedic texts are. They describe the river's direction, its confluences, even its gradual drying. Not myth, memory. Which leads to the biggest question. Did the Saraswati cradle a civilization far older than even the Indus? Some evidence says yes. Pottery shards, tools, and ruins beneath desert sands suggest continuous habitation long before Harappan cities rose. If so, the Saraswati wasn't just a river, it was a witness to something ancient, something profound, something forgotten. And when the river vanished, so too did whatever truth it once carried. But deserts don't always bury. Sometimes they reveal. And just beyond the Amazon's leafy curtain, another ghost civilization is coming into view, not from underwater, but from beneath the trees. The geoglyphs of the Amazon basin. For centuries, the Amazon was believed to be untouched, wilderness-dense, wild, and primeval, too harsh for advanced civilizations, too remote. But then came the deforestation. As trees fell, secrets emerged, and what they revealed was staggering. Huge geometric patterns, Circles, squares, massive ditches, lines stretching across miles of cleared land. From the air, they look like Nazca-style drawings. On the ground, they're impossibly engineered. Welcome to the Amazon geoglyphs. So far, hundreds have been uncovered. Many are precisely aligned with cardinal directions. Some are grouped into complex layouts. Others form shapes with symbolic resonance serpents, crosses, stars. And they're old. At least 2,000 years. Maybe more. Who built them? No one knows. These aren't just ceremonial. They imply societal coordination planning, labor, long-term stability, which means someone, or someones, lived here in large numbers, permanently. That flies in the face of everything we were taught about the Amazon. Until recently, the dominant theory was that the jungle was too nutrient-poor to support large-scale agriculture. But now we know about terra preta, dark earth, artificial soil, engineered by ancient people to be self-renewing, fertile, productive, evidence of human terraforming. The implications are earth-shaking. The Amazon wasn't wilderness, it was cultivated, managed, maybe even designed. So what happened to them? Like many ancient societies, they may have succumbed to disease after first contact with Europeans. Or perhaps they were erased by ecological catastrophe, floods, droughts, or something more abrupt. The point is, they were there, and they were big. These geoglyphs turn the Amazon into something else entirely. Not a jungle of survival, but a forest grown over the ruins of forgotten mastery. We're not just talking a few scattered villages. We're talking cities, road networks, symbolic landscapes. A civilization with language, cosmology, and a worldview alien to our own, lost beneath vines and centuries of silence. And speaking of lost worlds, buried cultures, and things that shouldn't be where they are, wait until you hear about ancient Egyptian and Roman artifacts popping up in the last place you'd expect, the American Midwest. The Burroughs Cave artifacts. Illinois. Not exactly the first place you'd expect to find ancient Egyptian inscriptions or Roman-style coins. But that's exactly what one man claimed. In the early 1980s, a man named Russell Burrough announced that he had discovered a cave near Olney, Illinois, filled with stone tablets, artifacts, and carvings that would rewrite history. The items, according to Burrough, bore inscriptions in multiple ancient languages: Egyptian hieroglyphs, Greek, Latin, Phoenician, even ancient Hebrew. Some tablets appeared to depict pharaohs. Others looked like they belonged in a Mediterranean museum, not a Midwestern cornfield. They called it Burroughs Cave. Immediately, red flags flew. The mainstream archaeological community dismissed the find as a hoax. No one else could locate the cave. Burrough refused to disclose its exact location, citing fears of looting. The artifacts, hundreds of them, were mostly in his possession, with no verified provenance. Case closed? Not so fast. Because here's the thing. Some of the artifacts weren't easily explainable. The stone tablets featured stylized imagery that did resemble Egyptian iconography: falcons, ankhs, solar boats. And the written languages, while often jumbled or inaccurately carved, bore enough resemblance to spark controversy. Some believe the artifacts were inspired by real relics, fakes made with just enough accuracy to fool the untrained eye. But others think Burrough stumbled onto something real, something forbidden, a site that pointed to transoceanic contact thousands of years before Columbus, or even the Vikings. Could it have been a Phoenician outpost? A lost colony of Mediterranean explorers? Or something even older, refugees from a sunken civilization, preserving fragments of their culture in a new land? Skeptics point to the inconsistencies, the lack of peer-reviewed validation, the suspicious circumstances. Fair. But the volume of artifacts, many, hand-carved, stylistically unique, and bearing languages few would know how to fake, complicates the picture. Even if just one artifact is real, It breaks the entire framework of New World archaeology. Burroughs Cave remains elusive. Some say the entrance collapsed. Others say the whole thing was an elaborate fraud. But believers insist the cave is there, buried under secrecy and time, hiding the story of a voyage no textbook dares to tell. And while that mystery simmers in the dark soil of Illinois, another one plays out thousands of miles away, this time in the heart of one of the world's greatest ancient civilizations, which suddenly vanished into thin air. The puzzling disappearance of the Indus Valley civilization. It was massive, organized, clean. The Indus Valley civilization, also called the Harappan civilization, flourished across what is now Pakistan and northwest India over 4,000 years ago. At its peak, it rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa boasted advanced urban planning, grid layouts, brick houses, complex drainage systems, even indoor toilets. These people weren't just civilized, they were modern. And then, silence. Around 1900 BCE, the cities emptied. The writing system never deciphered stopped. Trade collapsed, the lights went out, and no one knows why. There are theories. Climate change, river shifts, drought, earthquakes. Some say the Gagar-Hakra River dried up, collapsing agriculture and trade. Others suggest internal societal breakdown or even invasion. But none of the evidence is conclusive. No layer of ash, no signs of mass violence, just a slow, quiet disappearance. What's weird is how total it was. Cultures don't usually vanish, they evolve, absorb, rebrand. But the Indus? It vanished without a footprint. Its script left no Rosetta Stone. Its religion left no temples. Its kings, if it had any, left no names. What if it wasn't slow at all? Some researchers argue for a sudden catastrophe, a flood, a pandemic, or a celestial event, a comet impact, triggering environmental collapse. Ancient Vedic texts from the same region speak of great upheavals. Fire in the sky, poisonous winds, endless night, allegory, or a surviving memory. Others connect it to larger global disruptions, like the mysterious collapse of civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean around the same time. Coincidence? Or evidence of a planetary reset? And here's the kicker. We still don't understand the Harappan language. That means we're staring at their ruins, walking their streets, handling their seal sand, hearing absolutely nothing from them. What did they call themselves? What did they believe? What warnings might they have left behind? We don't know. But their cities remain dusty, silent, stubborn, waiting. And while the Indus crumbled quietly, another ancient civilization rose along the Nile. But even there, amid the grandeur of dynasties, we find artifacts that don't belong, fragments from a time before the pharaohs, whispering of a deeper history. The pre-dynastic Egyptian artifacts. Before the pyramids, before the pharaohs, before writing etched its way into stone, there was something else in Egypt. Something older, stranger, forgotten. Scattered across the Nile Valley, there are artifacts and architectural fragments that predate Egypt's first dynasty. Some are rough tools and pottery, expected remnants of a developing culture, but others aren't so easy to explain. We're talking massive stone vessels carved from diorite, of the hardest rocks on Earth. So precise, so polished, that even modern engineers blink. Some of these bowls are perfectly symmetrical, with walls thinner than a coin. Others are oddly shaped, functionally ambiguous, as if made for rituals or machines we don't understand. And then there are the megalithic structures, blocks and cores and foundations at sites like Abydos and Saqqara, which seem older than the temples built atop them. Their erosion patterns suggest age beyond dynastic timelines. Their alignment and construction challenge the capabilities of the Neolithic toolkit. Who built them? The mainstream says these were the products of proto-dynastic Egyptians learning to cut stone, experimenting with form, But some of these structures don't feel like experiments. They feel like remnants, leftovers. The kind of architecture that inspired dynasties, not the kind they'd build while learning. Then there are the objects found out of context. Cylindrical drills, tubular cores, and circular saw marks embedded in stone. The evidence of high-precision stone cutting. Tools not found but marks left behind. Shadows of a technology no one can explain. What if Egypt didn't rise from the sand, but was rebuilt? What if the early dynasties inherited a ruined land already touched by something older? What if their gods were memories of real figures engineers, builders, sky beings whose technologies were preserved in myth? Some Egyptologists scoff, others remain silent. But even the skeptics can't explain everything. The tools don't match the stone. The dates don't match the erosion. The story doesn't quite line up. Pre-dynastic Egypt is a riddle with no vowels, all consonants and echoes. And just when you think it can't get more bizarre, an ancient scroll surfaces that speaks not of gods, but of fire rings and flying discs streaking across the Egyptian sky. The Thule Papyrus. Among the whispers of ancient Egypt, the Thule Papyrus is one of the loudest and the most controversial. It doesn't speak of pharaohs or pyramids. It doesn't recount battles or agricultural yields. Instead, it tells of something far more surreal. A sky full of flying fire circles. Allegedly discovered in the Vatican archives by Alberto Tulli, a former director of the Egyptian section of the Vatican Museum, this papyrus has never been fully authenticated. The story goes that Tully found a transcription knot, the original of an ancient Egyptian document detailing a bizarre celestial event during the reign of Thutmose III. The text describes circles of fire appearing in the sky, brilliant, silent, maneuvering in formations. They hovered above the capital, causing panic. The pharaoh himself reportedly witnessed the event. The objects remained visible for days, eventually ascending higher into the heavens and disappearing. UFOs, ancient drones, or metaphorical descriptions of a solar event? Skeptics claim it's a mistranslation, or a modern fabrication altogether, and it might be. The original papyrus has never been produced for verification. The transcription is said to have been written in Reformed Hieratic, a version of ancient Egyptian script. Some believe the language used doesn't align with the period. Still, believers in ancient alien theory point to the Thule Papyrus as key evidence that humanity has been experiencing and recording visits from above for millennia. This isn't just a vague reference to gods or stars. The account is detailed, physical, and most importantly terrifying to its witnesses. Whether real or not, the Thule Papyrus raises a legitimate question. If ancient people saw something extraordinary, how would they describe it? Would fire circles be the closest approximation of glowing metallic crafts? Would priests interpret lights in the sky as signs from the gods? And if Egypt recorded something like this, how many other sightings were lost, buried, or reinterpreted through religious filters? Even in doubt, the Thule Papyrus has carved a niche in the catalog of anomalies, not just because of what it says, but because of what it dares to imply that Egypt's skies weren't always empty. And speaking of empty, let's shift focus from the heavens to the depths where, in the icy heart of North America, lies a submerged mystery beneath Lake Michigan, dubbed a Great Wall, but belonging to no known civilization. The Great Wall of Michigan. Beneath the blue-gray waters of Lake Michigan, sonar scans have picked up something unexpected, a structure long, linear, and composed of heavy stones, deliberately placed at a depth that implies astonishing age. Nicknamed the Great Wall of Michigan, it's not a wall in the military sense. It's more like a submerged formation of massive boulders aligned in a straight line, extending for hundreds of feet. Some say it looks like an ancient breakwater or road. Others see remnants of a prehistoric structure now drowned beneath glacial melt. Here's the twist. If it's man-made, then it dates back to before the last glacial period. That's over 10,000 years ago, which is, frankly, not supposed to happen. The prevailing archaeological view holds that no advanced civilization existed in the Great Lakes region at that time. Nomadic tribes? Sure. Tool users? Definitely. But stone engineers? Builders of megalithic alignments? That's where the narrative phrase. Divers who've seen the site describe oddly stacked stones, some with right angles or smooth faces, features uncommon in natural glacial activity. Others claim there's a carving on one of the rocks, possibly of a mastodon, implying it predates the animal's extinction. Mainstream scientists remain cautious. Without definitive artifact spottery, tools, bones, the site can't be classified as anything other than a curiosity. Natural formation? Maybe. Misinterpreted glacial moraine? Possibly. But it feels intentional, too symmetrical, too precise. And here's the broader question. If an ancient civilization once inhabited the now submerged lands of the Great Lakes, what happened to it? Was it erased by the end of the Ice Age? Did rising waters swallow cities and memories in a single generation? Globally, similar claims exist: submerged ruins off the coasts of Japan, India, and the Caribbean. Could Michigan's mystery be part of a broader pattern? What if humans saw proto-humans building, mapping, engineering thousands of years earlier than accepted? And what if the proof of that past now lies underwater, just beyond reach, slowly eroding under waves and disbelief? The Great Wall of Michigan refuses to tell its story, but its silence adds to a growing chorus of submerged secrets. And from stone structures to smelted secrets, the next mystery dives into metallurgy, the moment when humanity suddenly stopped pounding metal and started melting it. The origin of copper metallurgy. Copper, shiny, soft, and unlike anything nature offered in a usable form until we learned to melt it. Metallurgy wasn't supposed to be easy. It required temperatures humans weren't supposed to control, knowledge of minerals, airflow, oxidation, and yet, it emerged across the globe almost simultaneously, in cultures that had no contact with each other. In the Balkans, copper tools appear as far back as 7,000 years ago. In the Americas, the Great Lakes region shows signs of massive copper extraction operations over 6,000 years ago. In the Near East, smelting emerges with eerie suddenness alongside complex alloys like bronze, which adds tin to copper in just the right ratio to change history. So, here's the problem. How did multiple cultures, on different continents, discover the exact same high-skill process at roughly the same time? Copper doesn't just melt. You need temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's not your average campfire. You need furnaces, bellows, smelting pits, slag management. In short, technology. The official answer is parallel evolution. Humanity simply figured it out wherever copper was abundant. Maybe. But what if it wasn't parallel discovery, but shared inheritance? What if copper metallurgy wasn't discovered at all but remembered? Some theorists propose a pre-flood civilization that spread the knowledge before vanishing. Survivors passed it down, piece by piece. Myth supports this. In Sumerian lore, the gods brought metal from the mountains. In Mesoamerica, the rain god taught metallurgy. In Indian epics, flying machines made of metal required sacred knowledge to build and repair. And then there's the Great Lakes copper boom. Thousands of tons of pure copper were mined from the region long before modern industry. But where did it all go? Native tribes used copper sparingly. The rest? Some claim it was shipped out, possibly even to the Old World, long before the age of Columbus. The implications are enormous. Copper wasn't just a tool, it was a trigger for weapons, for farming, for trade. It was the foundation of the Bronze Age. So who really lit that forge first? Because the moment we smelted metal, we started shaping not just tools, but destiny. And next? We turn our gaze to those who shaped storious tales of titans that once walked this land, whose bones may still be buried beneath your feet. The giants of Native American folklore. Across the sprawling oral histories of Native American tribes, one figure looms larger than life, sometimes literally. Giants, colossal humanoids, red-haired cannibals. Massive warriors who lived in caves, shaped the land, and warred with early humans. And these aren't isolated legends. From the Pacific Northwest to the Great Plains, from the Iroquois to the Paiute, the stories echo the same. The earth once belonged to beings of enormous size, and they were not kind. The Paiute people tell of the Siteka, a tribe of red-haired giants who lived in Nevada's caves. These giants, the story goes, were aggressive, cannibalistic, and nearly impossible to kill. Eventually, the tribes united and drove the giants into Lovelock Cave, setting it ablaze to end the threat. That cave is real, and it did contain ancient remains. Giant bones? Not officially. But the rumors persist. Similar tales crop up among the Choctaw, who speak of a race of giant men who once roamed what is now Mississippi. The Comanche recall a race of white giants in the mountains who ruled the land before being destroyed. Even the Sioux mention the Heyokas clown, like backward giants who could summon storms and walk through time. Archaeologists have long dismissed these legends as metaphor, cultural exaggeration, or misunderstood history. But then come the reports, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries, of oversized skeletons unearthed in burial mounds. Newspapers ran headlines about 7-foot, 8-foot, even 9-foot tall remains being found across the American Midwest. Mounds were opened, bones disappeared. The Smithsonian, often involved in these excavations, was later accused by conspiracy theorists of covering up giant remains. Were these literal giants, or just very tall individuals? Or, perhaps, misidentified mastodon bones? The lack of physical evidence today makes it hard to say. But the persistence of these legends across disconnected cultures suggests something deeper, either a shared mythic memory or a now erased chapter in human history. And while modern science has no place for Nephilim or Titans, the land seems to remember. Caves, mounds, and eerie silhouettes on high cliffs hint at an age when the scale of things of people was different. And somewhere deep in the jungle, that difference may still be hiding. Because the next tale isn't just about size, it's about a city that refuses to die, buried not by time, but by trees. The lost city of Z, Amazon. For centuries, tales spoke of a shining city hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest, a place of wide roads, towering temples, and advanced knowledge. Some called it El Dorado, others knew it as Akakor. But to British explorer Percy Fawcett, it was simply Z. Fawcett believed the ruins of a lost civilization lay somewhere near the border of Brazil and Bolivia. He wasn't guessing. He had old maps, mysterious documents, and native testimonies pointing toward a city swallowed by the forest. In 1925, he set off in search of it. He was never seen again. That could have been the end of it. Another explorer lost to the jungle. Another myth dismissed by science. But the whispers didn't stop. Fawcett's story became legend. Dozens of expeditions followed. Some disappeared. Others returned, empty-handed. But every few years, something strange surfaced. Stories from tribes about stone cities in the trees, aerial photos showing suspicious geometric patterns, fragments of pottery too sophisticated to be tribal craft, and, most compelling of all, the Amazon geoglyphs, massive earthworks discovered in recent decades, suggesting urban planning on a massive scale. Could Z be real? Modern satellite imaging and LiDAR scans have begun to peel back the canopy. What they reveal is staggering. Grid patterns, canals, raised causeways, mounds. Not the random ruins of scattered tribes, but a network, a system, a civilization. One theory suggests that the Amazon was once home to millions before European contact. That disease wiped out 90% of the population, and the jungle simply reclaimed their cities. Another points to Terra Pretae, the mysterious, dark earth, found throughout the region, believed to be man-made, fertile, long-lasting, engineered soil. You don't invent that without intent. And still, the city remains hidden, maybe buried, maybe camouflaged by the earth itself. Or maybe, as Fawcett believed, protected by forces that don't want it found. The search for Z is not just about finding ruin sites, about rewriting what we think we know about South America, about the capabilities of indigenous peoples, about the limits of ancient technology, and about what else might have survived in that jungle. Because as the Amazon guards its secrets, it also guards roads massive, unnatural ones laid down long before concrete and traffic jams. The anomalous ancient roads of South America, cutting through dense jungle, over hills, across valleys, and sometimes straight through mountains. South America is crisscrossed with ancient roads that defy explanation. They're too wide, too straight, too engineered. The most famous is the Inca road system, a network of trails stretching thousands of miles from Quito to Santiago, known as the Cro-magnon. It's a marvel, but even older roads have been found beneath it. Roads without names, foundations of routes that predate the Inca by centuries, maybe millennia. Some are stone-paved, others appear to be hardened dirt, infused with strange binding agents. What makes them strange isn't just their construction, but their placement. They lead into nowhere, or worse, into regions that were considered uninhabitable, across swamps, through cliffs, into the jungle's densest heart. Who built them? Some believe these roads were part of a forgotten Amazonian Empyrean advanced society lost to time and trees, but the scale is unnerving. These aren't just walking trails, some are over 20 feet wide, with retaining walls, drainage systems, elevated sections. And then there are the legends. Stories of sky roads, roads that glowed, roads that could only be seen at certain times of the year when the stars aligned. Tribes describe paths walked by gods, or by those who came before the gods' giants, star beings, or the serpent people. Some researchers have noted the road's bizarre alignments, coinciding with celestial bodies or solstice points. Others point out that they seem built not for foot traffic, but for carts or platforms, but no wheels. No beasts of burden, just the implication of heavy transport and advanced navigation. Were these highways for migration, trade, ritual, or were they connected to something higher literally? Some theorize landing strips. Others suggest the roads mirrored star constellations, part of a terrestrial map aligned to the heavens. Whatever their purpose, these roads are real. Their existence challenges the view of pre-Columbian South America as primitive or isolated. And like veins buried under jungle skin, they carry the pulse of something ancient, something deliberate. Which brings us to our next enigma, tomb deep in the sands of Egypt, whose ceiling may be more than decoration. It may be a star chart, or a map, or a message, from someone or something that came from above. The star map of the Cave of the Mages, Egypt. Deep in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, amid the dust and silence of forgotten tombs, lies a chamber whose ceiling isn't just art, it's a message. The so-called Cave of the Mages isn't an official name. It's more of a whispered label used by fringe historians and alternative theorists for a particular tomb that features a striking celestial diagram painted across its upper vault. At first glance, it looks like decoration. Stars, figures, strange animals, divine boats, but stare longer, and patterns begin to emerge. Constellations, planetary orbits, alignments that, some argue, correspond with actual astronomical data not just of the present sky, but of how it appeared tens of thousands of years ago. How would ancient Egyptians know that? How would they map stars invisible to the naked eye? Some of the placements suggest precession awareness, a concept modern astronomy only fully grasped in recent centuries. Even more curious are the figures surrounding the stars. Not traditional Egyptian deities, but elongated beings. Long heads, slim limbs. Some are shown descending from disc-like objects. Others are standing beside what appear to be strange technological instruments boxes, rods, even wheels. Symbolic or literal? Mainstream Egyptologists interpret these as representations of the night sky, tied to their mythos nut, the sky goddess, swallowing the sun, or Ra's celestial journey. But others aren't so convinced. The precision of the mapping, the symmetry of the layout, and the deliberate obscurity of the symbols feel less like religion and more like record-keeping. Is this tomb a kind of ancient observatory? A cosmic ledger carved in pigment and stone? Or worse, a warning? Some parts of the ceiling are marked with what appear to be catastrophic alignment symbols associated with flood, fire, and darkness clustering around particular celestial formations. A record of past cataclysms? A prophecy? Of course, the most radical theories go even further, suggesting this is a map of star systems beyond Earth, that these are not just constellations, but coordinates, destinations, origins. What if this was not a tomb at all, but a vault of memory, a repository for star-born knowledge, a cave of the mages? Indeed, only the magic here was written in light. And speaking of sudden appearances and unexplained knowledge, our next enigma involves a culture that seemed to come from nowhere with calendars, writing, and colossal stone heads already in hand. The origin of the Olmec civilization, beyond heads. They're best known for their heads-massive, megalithic sculptures, up to 12 feet tall, carved from single basalt boulders, each face distinct, each expression mysterious. But the Olmecs were far more than sculptors of stone giants. They were, quite possibly, the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Their influence birthed the Maya, the Aztecs, and countless others. But here's the catch. The Olmecs seem to have sprung into existence fully formed around 1600 BCE with an already advanced society. No slow cultural buildup, no transitional artifacts. Just bam, pyramids, roads, sophisticated art, a writing system, and a calendar so precise it could rival modern instruments. So, where did they come from? The Olmecs left no origin story. Their writing hasn't been fully deciphered. Their ruins like San Lorenzo and Levant offer no clear explanation. Only echoes of a high-functioning civilization obsessed with astronomy, serpents, and the underworld. Some researchers suggest they were local peoples who experienced a cultural leap. Others propose they were a remnant or revival of an older, forgotten group home that survived a cataclysm and restarted civilization with what knowledge remained. Fringe theories abound, that they had African origins, pointing to the negroid features on the colossal heads, that they were seafarers from Asia or the Middle East, that their knowledge came from sky beings deities who descended to teach math, agriculture, and celestial tracking. More curiously, the Olmecs had an uncanny grasp of magnetism. They created lodestones naturally magnetized rock sand, possibly used them to align their cities. Some claim they understood geomancy, mapping energy lines across the Earth's surface. Then there's their obsession with transformation, half-jaguar, half-human depictions, portals to other realms. Were they recalling genetic memories, shamanic experiences, or something else entirely? The Olmecs didn't fade, they fractured. Their cities were absorbed or abandoned, but their ideas echoed forward into Mayan temples, Aztec rituals, and even modern Mesoamerican traditions. Yet their beginning remains a void, a sudden explosion of knowledge with no clear spark. And speaking of misplaced sparks, what happens when we find human-made tools buried in layers of earth that shouldn't have any humans at all? The pre-Ice Age artifacts in glacial till. Every so often, while digging deep into Earth's oldest layers, someone finds something that shouldn't be there. A hammer embedded in rock, a spear point in sediment laid down before the last ice age, a carved figurine beneath a glacial deposit. These aren't stories from science fiction. They're real reports, documented by miners, geologists, and even museum curators. The problem is, they don't fit. Glacial till is made of unsorted debris deposited by moving ice. It's chaotic, dense, and ancient, often over 12,000 years old. Anything found inside it should be prehistoric, non-human, or natural. But what if it's not? Take the case of a stone tool found in glacial deposits in Ohio, or strange carvings found deep beneath layers of loess in Nebraska, or even older claims of metallic spheres and worked stones found in South African mines dated to over 2 billion years. Now, many of these finds have been dismissed. Contamination, misdating, hoaxes, sure. But not all of them. Some remain unexplained, filed away as anomalies in the archaeological record. And here's the question. If even one of these finds is authentic, it upends everything. It means humans or someone with tool-making ability existed long before the official timeline allows, before recorded history, before the last ice age, possibly before Homo sapiens as we know them. There are two ways to interpret this. 1. Humanity is far older than we believe. Our ancestors weren't club-wielding brutes but something more advanced, wiped out by catastrophe, forced to start over again and again. Or 2, we weren't the first. That Earth has hosted multiple intelligent species, each rising, building, and falling before being swallowed by time, tectonics, and ice. Either way, the implications are staggering. Because buried in the mud and stone isn't just a tool, it's a message. That history isn't linear, that the past isn't behind you, it's below us. And the next clue? It's not buried at all. It stands out in the surf, revealed by the shifting tides. A timber circle, older than Stonehenge, lost to time until the sea gave it back. The Seahenge, home one. In 1998, on a lonely stretch of the Norfolk coast in England, the sea pulled back a secret. Hidden beneath peat and sand for over 4,000 years, a circle of ancient timber emerged, darkened by millennia of salt and silence. Dubbed Seahenge by the media, its official name is Home the First. It's not made of stone like its inland cousin. It's made of oak. 55 wooden posts driven into the earth in a near-perfect circle. In the center, an upturned tree stump, its roots reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. But here's the riddle. What was it for? Some say it was a mortuary site, where bodies were laid out for excarnation, letting nature strip the flesh from bone before burial. Others believe it marked a sacred space, a place for rituals tied to solstices and seasons. The orientation of the entrance, facing the rising midsummer sun, supports the latter. But the centerpiece, the inverted stump, is deeply symbolic. It inverts the natural order. Roots above, branches below. A world turned upside down. Was it meant to connect Earth with the underworld? Or to signify rebirth? Some scholars have linked it to shamanic practices, journeys between realms, or the axis mundith cosmic tree that connects all dimensions. The posts were split with stone tools, meaning this was crafted before the advent of metal in the region. Yet the precision of the circle, the labor involved, and the spiritual weight of the site suggest an advanced understanding of construction and cosmology. And it didn't stand alone. Home the Second, a second timber circle, lay nearby. These were not isolated structures but part of a larger sacred landscape now mostly swallowed by the sea. Some have speculated that the entire region, now marsh and coastline, was once a major spiritual hub, maybe even a pre-Druidic religious center. If so, what knowledge was lost beneath the waves? Seahenge challenges our assumptions about Neolithic people. It whispers that their world wasn't just survival and simplicity. It was rich, symbolic, and deeply tied to the cycles of nature and the cosmos. And as one ancient structure emerges from the sea, we're left wondering, what else did they know? What technologies? What tools? Because the next mystery isn't a monument, it's an absence. The eerie sense that the ancients had knowledge we can't replicate or explain, the lost technologies of the ancients, generalized. They left no instruction manuals, no blueprints, just the ruins of impossible things. From the Great Pyramid's mathematical precision to the megalithic walls of Sacsayhuaman, ancient structures around the world continue to defy explanation. The tools they should have, used chisels, copper hammers, stone-pounding stones don't line up with the results, carved granite that's as smooth as glass, interlocking blocks so tightly fitted you can't slide a razor between them. So, where are the tools? The official answer is that they've been lost, corroded, or simply haven't been found. But the results, the buildings are right there, and they tell a different story. One where lost technologies weren't just possible, they were necessary. Some researchers suggest the ancients had an understanding of acoustics far beyond our own. That sound was used to levitate or shape stone. Others point to ancient texts describing softening stones, using mysterious plant mixtures or vibrational energy. In Egypt, Peru, and India, we find massive stone weighing hundreds of tons transported across impossible terrain. No wheels, no pulleys, no beasts of burden depicted in the murals. Just the end result, perfection. There are holes bored into granite that would require diamond-tipped drills today, cut marks that suggest circular saws, and not just functionality, symmetry, consistency, design, as if someone knew exactly what they were doing. Then there's the metallurgy. In places like India, the iron pillar of Delhi has stood for over 1,600 years without rusting. Ancient Damascus steel was stronger and more flexible than modern alloys. Pre-Columbian South America had smelting techniques we still haven't replicated in labs. So what happened? One theory is that knowledge was siloed, kept secret by priesthoods or elites, passed down orally or ritualistically. When those cultures fell, the knowledge fell with them. Another theory. This wasn't human knowledge at all. It was inherited, gifted, or salvaged from something far older. The term lost technology doesn't mean alien necessarily, it just means it was there, and now it isn't. The evidence is etched into the stone. It's in the alignments, the engineering, the sheer audacity of what was built. And while the present struggles to recreate the past, the ancients whisper back in stone, "We knew something you forgot." And sometimes, the ancients didn't whisper. Sometimes they screamed, especially when the waters came. Because next, we explore a myth that spans the globia flood, so vast, so violent, nearly every culture remembers it. The Great Flood Legends, global commonality. It's in the Bible, the Quran, the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's carved into stone tablets in Sumer, sung in Polynesian chants, and whispered in the stories of Aboriginal Australians. It spans continents and centuries, a global myth, the Great Flood. Almost every culture has one. A deluge that drowns the world, a boat, a chosen few, a divine punishment, or, in some versions, a cosmic accident. In Mesopotamia, it's Utnapishtim. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah. In Hindu lore, Manu survives the flood with help from a fish deity, Matsya, who guides his boat to safety. In Chinese myth, it's Gun and Yu, who labor to tame the waters. In the Americas, the Hopi, Maya, and Inca all speak of flood cycles that reset the world. Why? Skeptics call it coincidence. Independent myths spawned from the universal fear of drowning. Rivers flood, seas rise, humans die. Myths get born, easy. But that doesn't explain the details. Why the same themes? The same imagery? The same archetype of the survivor? The ark? The divine warning? What if it wasn't myth but memory? Around 12,800 years ago, Earth experienced a sudden cooling period called the Younger Dryas, likely triggered by a comet impact or meltwater pulse. Ice caps collapsed. Sea levels surged possibly by hundreds of feet. Coastal civilizations, if they existed, would have been annihilated. That timeline aligns uncannily with the supposed dates of Atlantis, of Göbekli Tepe, of other megalithic anomalies. Could the flood myth be a cultural scar left by real survivors? Echoes of a civilization-ending event encoded into story to survive the ages? It's not just the water. The aftermath is always the same. Darkness, rebirth, a golden age that follows. A divine lesson. Or a cover-up? Some suggest the flood wasn't just natural, it was engineered. That a pre-flood society reached a dangerous level of advancement, triggering its own destruction. Nuclear catastrophe, planetary weaponry, or lost technologies spinning out of control. The flood was the reset button. And the survivors? They started again. With what little they remembered. Carving their memories into stone. Telling their children of gods, boats, and wrathful skies. It's a story so old, even the earth remembers, and from the waters rise a question, who taught us to build again? Because up next, we chase the blueprint, the knowledge that moved across continents, leaving stone monuments in its wake. The origin of the megalith builders, cultural spread. The megaliths are everywhere. Stone circles, dolmens, menhirs. From the windswept moors of Britain to the sunburned valleys of Sardinia, from the jungles of Indonesia to the Korean peninsula, these colossal stone structures defy borders, languages, and time. How did the idea spread? Stonehenge is the most famous, but it's just one in a vast constellation of similar monuments. Newgrange in Ireland, Carnac in France, Nabta Playa in Egypt, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Baalbek in Lebanon, Gunung Padang in Indonesia. Even Easter Island has its massive moai, staring across the sea like mute witnesses. Many of these sites predate writing, agriculture, even the wheel. And yet, they share eerie commonalities: astronomical alignments, solstice markers, acoustic properties, and a reverence for stone as a conduit between earth and sky. Mainstream archaeology explains the similarities as parallel development. After all, stone is the most available and durable material. If you want to build something big and permanent, you go with rock. Easy. Logical. But the details make it less easy. Across the globe, builders were creating similar shapes: T-shaped pillars, trilithons, concentric rings. They encoded celestial knowledge into the layouts. They buried their dead beneath. They used similar tools despite vast geographic separation. Is this just coincidence? Or is it evidence of a lost common ancestor? A megalithic culture, now erased, that seeded its knowledge before being wiped away by ice, sea, or fire. And here's the deeper mystery. The knowledge lasted. Long after the builders vanished, later cultures reused the sites. The Romans, the Celts, the Egyptians, the Incas, as if these structures had power, memory, or instruction embedded in their stone. Some legends say the stones could sing. Others say they were moved by sound, floated into place by chant or frequency. If such a technology existed, it's long gone, but the results remain, balanced on hills and ridges, daring time to knock them down. The origin of the megalith builders isn't just about who moved the rocks, it's about who taught the idea of the rocks, who whispered to scattered tribes across continents, mark the sky, build with permanence, speak through stone. And speaking of mysterious markings, the next anomaly isn't even human-made. It's a phenomenon that writes its message across the grasslands of Namibia, circles of emptiness, as precise as they are unexplained. The purpose of the prehistoric fairy circles of Namibia. Across the remote grasslands of Namibia, a strange pattern appears. Thousands of circular patches of barren earth, each surrounded by a ring of taller grass. These fairy circles dot the desert in clusters that stretch for miles, perfectly round, consistently spaced, ancient. From the sky, they resemble a vast code-like pixels in a message written across the earth. No one knows exactly what causes them. Scientists have proposed explanations, but none satisfy completely. Termite activity? Maybe. Competition for water among plant roots? Plausible. Self-organizing ecosystems? Interesting, but unproven. What makes them so baffling is their order. These aren't random dead zones. They're laid out in geometric patterns. In some areas, they form hexagonal arrays, the kind of pattern you'd expect from a silicon chip, not a desert plain. And they last. Some circles persist for decades, even centuries. New ones form, old ones vanish, but the pattern remains. Local Himba tribes say the circles are footprints of gods, or the breath of ancestors, or scorched patches left behind by underground dragons. Folklore, yes, but often folklore points to memory. A symbolic way of describing something no longer understood. Could these circles be the residue of ancient activity, forgotten structures, settlements, or energy systems long since reclaimed by nature? Or could they be natural expressions of some unknown Earth process zone that early people recognized and incorporated into their cosmology? Some theorists have suggested a geophysical anomaly beneath the surface, magnetism, radiation, or even vibration fields that influences plant growth in these patterns. Others, more boldly, suggest they are not natural at all, that they are the traces of something ancient and non-human, a forgotten technology, a biological experiment, a message. The mystery deepens when similar formations are discovered on other continents, Australia, especially raising the possibility of a global phenomenon. Whatever their cause, the fairy circles of Namibia stand as a strange frontier between science and myth. They refuse easy answers. They exist. They persist. And they challenge our sense of what nature or history is allowed to do. But where science fails, the stars might answer, because the ancients didn't just look down, they looked up, and in places all over the world, they built not just homes or tombs but observatories. Star tracking machines made of stone, the prehistoric star charts, observatories. Before telescopes, before compasses, before written calendars, there were the stars. And somehow, the ancients didn't just watch the heavens. They mapped them. They aligned their structures to solstices, equinoxes, planetary risings, and lunar cycles with breathtaking precision. Stonehenge aligns with the midsummer sunrise, Newgrange in Ireland with the winter solstice. Nabta Playa, a prehistoric site in Egypt's Nubian desert, may predate them both, aligning with the rising of Sirius and the summer solstice. These were not accidents. They were architectural intentions. Then there's Göbekli Tepe, arguably the oldest known megalithic site in the world, circa 9600 BCE. One theory posits that its T-shaped pillars mark star positions in the ancient sky, constellations. Astronomical myths frozen in stone. In Central America, Mayan pyramids tracked Venus, eclipses, and lunar cycles. In Peru, the Nazca lines may function as a giant star map. In India, ancient stepwells were aligned to solar events. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat mirrors the constellation Draco. None of this should have been possible, at least not according to conventional history. No written records, no advanced mathematics. And yet, these alignments are accurate to a degree that rivals modern instruments. How? Some suggest trial and error, generations of oral transmission, meticulous observation. Maybe. But the consistency across continents hints at something more: a shared understanding, a global science, a philosophy where time, space, and ritual were interconnected. Even more bizarre are the star charts themselves. In France's Lascaux caves, 17,000-year-old paintings may depict the Pleiades. In Germany, the Nebra sky disk dating to 1600 BCE displays the sun, moon, and stars in one of the oldest known sky maps, found buried, as if deliberately hidden. Were these observatories places of worship? Calendars for agriculture? Tools for prophecy? Or were they built in homage to the stars because someone came from there? Ancient texts from Sumer to Mesoamerica speak of star beings, sky gods, visitors from above, who taught humans math, agriculture, writing. The line between astronomy and mythology blurs. And maybe that's the point. Because when you align your temple to a star, you're not just tracking time, you're honoring origin, memory, return. And that brings us to the final mysterion that ties them all together. A question painted in caves, carved in tombs, etched into legend. What if humans once walked with monsters? What if the myths weren't myths at all? The coexistence of ancient humans with mythical beasts. Every culture has them. The dragons of China, the thunderbirds of North America, the serpent gods of Mesoamerica, the griffins, chimeras, leviathans, and fire-breathing monsters of myth and scripture. Enormous, terrifying primal beings that once ruled the earth until, supposedly, humans arrived. But what if humans didn't follow the monsters? What if we lived beside them? Cave paintings in France depict creatures that resemble woolly mammoths, rhinos, even giant cats with details so precise it's like the artist had seen them yesterday. That much is expected. But some depictions, from Africa to Australia, go further, showing reptilian beasts with horns, frills, long tails, even wings. They match no known species still alive today. But they do resemble creatures from the Mesozoic era millions of years before modern humans. Then there are the bones. Occasionally, human footprints are found next to those of massive animals, sometimes even what appear to be dinosaur tracks. Science says it's a misreading, that the strata are mixed, that it's impossible. And maybe it is. But the sheer number of anomalies suggests at least one thing: something's off. Many Native American tribes speak of battles with enormous beings, sherry, scaled or feathered. Some claim their ancestors hunted them. Others say they worshipped them. In African oral traditions, giant serpents once ruled the rivers. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr encircles the world. In Hindu cosmology, the Naga dwell below us. Always giant, always ancient, always close to human memory. Mainstream archaeology sees this as the power of metaphor. Early humans trying to make sense of nature's chaos. But what if the myths are fractured memories of real encounters? Could a species of prehistoric megafauna discovered or surviving longer than we think have overlapped with early human societies? Could legends be the distorted memory of survival during mass extinction? And if so, where did the knowledge of these creatures go? Some suggest global catastrophe wiped them out. Others propose that they were hunted to extinction. A few theorists go further, saying the monsters were engineered beings from an earlier world, released or abandoned by a civilization we've long forgotten. The answer may never come. Or maybe it's already here in the stories, the paintings, the monuments. Because when you step back, the picture sharpens. Not as isolated oddities, but as one long chain of echoes of things we buried, or forgot, or were made to forget. And maybe that's the final truth of pre-flood history. We don't just live in the aftermath, we live in the amnesia.